raining cats and dogs outside. I'm surprised the dog went out this morning. He's not one for going out in the rain, but he went right out. But it's nice. I like listening to the rain. So I've been re-engaging with my brother's death from a different perspective. Not from the perspective of, my brother's a victim of circumstance, a victim of chance, a victim of just life being hard. But instead, I've been interacting with this space from a perspective of anger. So I was kind of surprised at how little there was around his story in terms of emotion. And I've analyzed his story and talked to therapists about his story and the experience a lot in my life. But I've never explored it from the perspective of anger. And so I started talking about it yesterday, and a bunch of really interesting things came up. So as I was talking about it in my mindfulness group, what came up was, being really aware of his anger as a part of his response to his life being threatened and then ultimately being taken from him. And I talked about it with my mindfulness group, and part of what my mindfulness group brought up, one of the members brought up, a brain at the age of 2 doesn't really have a sense of self, right? There's not a whole lot of self-awareness. There's awareness of life, but there's not a whole lot of self. It's still developing. It's in the early stages. So to me, that really spoke to the fact that this wasn't so much an Edward mental. It's not a mental thing. The anger wasn't so much mental. It wasn't so much physical, because we were talking about the physical, and the physical was, his nervous system. So it's like a little 2-year-old nervous system that's, barely becoming kind of turned on. And, they say things about the terrible twos, right? So the kid doesn't get its way and they kind of freak out and everything. So there was that. And then there was the piece about for me, this whole relationship was all a relationship to God. So the anger that I felt was anger at God. And that's what I think Edward was pointing me to, was there was an anger, a spiritual kind of anger, a willingness to fight. And I never given voice to that. I'd never given voice to Edward's anger. It feels like it's almost like he's been talking to me, or he's been trying to talk to me from that moment to, hey, pay attention to this too. And I don't quite know what this means. I'm just getting into this as kind of a story that's been incomplete. But this anger part, really resonated. And when I thought about it and I talked about it on the stream yesterday, that really is something let loose. So there's an element in there that hadn't been kind of exercised. So there's an energy in there that just hadn't been kind of acknowledged. And I think it was something bigger than mental, physical. There was a spiritual element to it. So after that, I went to kind of YouTube and started exploring around, because I knew that I know that people have discussed anger as being a part of individuality, a part of self breaking free from, kind of nature itself. So like, if you think about an animal in nature, that animal doesn't perceive itself as separate from nature. It perceives itself within nature, and it would never say, I don't like this. like a human being. They don't have a nature. An animal, the human being has a prefrontal cortex, which creates executive function, which creates the capacity for individuality. It gives us our sense of self, our sense of separation. So that's very significant. It's very significant. It's massively significant. It's billions of years of evolution significant. And so I read somewhere that anger was somehow in some way associated with the first human beings becoming self-aware, like the first ego. Because often I've associated or interacted with ego as something, get rid of the ego, cancel out the ego, get rid of the ego and you'll be fine. But the ego, without the ego, there's no self. So anyway, I went and I did some research on YouTube and, kind of Google search or YouTube searched anger and God, first ego or first anger, first people, whatever. And I found a really interesting video that a guy from India had done, Christian from India, and it was a video from like the most unlikely place, but it really just has stuck with me because it didn't have a flashy like presentation. It was just something real simple. And what was so simple about it was the guy pointed to something that I've been looking at all along but never really noticed. So he talks about the book of Genesis, and the book of Genesis is the story of, among other things, the story of Adam and Eve. The very first chapters when God created the earth. And in the story, I've often heard that in the story, and there's a garden of Garden of Eden, and in the Garden of Eden, there's the tree of good and evil, right? And God said, you can eat anything from the garden, but don't eat from that tree. And then the story is the serpent kind of tricks Eve into eating from eating the apple from the tree of good and evil, and then Eve tricks Adam into eating it, and then man is cast out of the kingdom of heaven. Well, this guy, he's like, well, read the book, and you'll see that there are two main trees in the Garden of Eden. These two trees are the key, right? So the whole garden's full of animals and fruits and everything, and it's all for humans to consume, to live. But there's two trees, and God says, if you eat from the tree of life, you'll live forever. If you eat from the tree of good and evil, you will die spiritually. So those are the 2 points he really emphasizes. Like, one, there are two trees in the Garden of Eden that God had presented as important. And if you eat from the tree of good and evil, you die. But it's not that you die like you physically die, it's you spiritually die. And so that really hit me, because what happened for me was I never looked at Edward's death as from his perspective. I only looked at it from mine. And what I came out of was anger. And anger just drove me to everything. I was so angry at God. And because I was angry at God, I went out. I mean, at first I didn't. At first I really kind of really struggled. But then I left. Like I left my home. I joined the military. Well, I mean, these are all steps that take over time. But the long story short, I joined the military. I went through all these processes to become stronger. I changed and evolved and searched and fought and tried to become kind of on my own this person who would no longer feel victimized again. And for 30 years, right, I left, right? I left what I knew. And I've only now started to kind of come back in these different, more heartfelt, open, loving kind of ways. And so the story, as I'm kind of putting it together now, as I'm talking it through, the story of the Garden of Eden is the story, in my mind, of the first awareness. And kind of if you're God, if you're the first awareness, how would you articulate a story that shows the human capacity, which is you're from the divine, you are divine, you have also these choices. If you eat from the tree of your choices, you'll get the impression that you know the difference between good and evil, and you will move down that path as though you have that knowledge, and you'll get a sense that you do. But you'll ultimately die a spiritual death. And what that means is that you'll lose your connection to your Creator, which is divine. And so what God did in that story was say, here's the choice. And that's first awareness. It's the choice that matters. It's the choice. Everything comes back to this choice. And so the story is not that, God chased Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden with a righteous sort of anger, which is a part that I this guy mentions, but I went back and read my Bible and was like, there it is. And so I want to read more about it, but there's this element of this anger, which is this ego, this thing, this part of us that reaches out and that moves away from. And I think that's what God wants us to do. I mean, I think God wants us to go out and search, and do all the seeking we want and exploring, but to come back to this relationship with God, with the divine, and kind of, that's it, right? I mean, that's it, right? It's making that choice to go out and to engage and to fully engage with the manifestation of God, which is human experience, and then come back to God and just do it over again, right? The notion of the tree of life is complete. The tree of good and evil is a never-ending experience. And each time you move away, you come back, and there's this new layer to be explored. And that's what happens. That's what's happened with Edward. It's like this anger was this new layer to explore. So I've started to explore this, and as life would have it, all day long, things about anger showed up. It just showed up outside of me, right? It showed up in my mindfulness community. It showed up a lot on a Clubhouse. But what also showed up is the way people use anger as armor. And I found that to be really interesting. So it showed up in several ways. So first, it showed up as anger at other people's success. So instead of articulating or explaining or engaging with feelings of jealousy or insecurity or not good enough, it's success stories on social media are BS. People sharing their success stories is actually detrimental to other people, because by sharing success, you give people this notion that positivity is the way you have to be, and if you're not positive, you're wrong. So that was that narrative. Another narrative was just stone cold anger and hatred at injustice. And so I listened to some people describe how their anger could have led them to down this path, and on this path, their anger resulted in anger everywhere they went. And so their anger carried them into spaces that met up with other aspects of anger in different spaces, and then they brought that anger back to other spaces, and then they shared their anger, and there was a sense of community around anger. And like that was just like it was so obvious, right? And then so I interacted with that. Then I also interacted with some triggers that typically make me angry. And because I'm just dialed into anger at the moment, like I just nipped them in the bud immediately. Like it was like there was the spark of anger and it just kind of just petered out. I mean, it just like, I'd say three times yesterday, sparks flew, and it was just kind of like, it's like a candle lit. It's an anger candle. It could have burst into a flame. It was like, and just, and it felt so empowering. And I didn't need the anger for anything. And I could feel it. I could feel it kind of, you want to go here? You want to go here? We can go here. We can go here. But I didn't need to. And the last thing I'll say is in martial art movies, they often showcase how, the novice student has to learn discipline and humility before they can learn the power of the new martial art form. And so, Karate Kid, Daniel has to wax on and wax off the cars, like 100 cars all day, wax on, wax off. And he has to do that before Miyagi will teach him the good stuff. The same in like Karate Kid 3 with like Will Smith's kid. In not Jet Li, the other, I can't remember the guy's name, but another martial arts master, he has to put on his coat over and over and over again. Just put on his coat, take it off, put it on, take it off. And he's just like, I don't want to do this. This is stupid. Why do I have to do the same thing over and over again, right? And that's the thing, right? You have to go through these steps over and over and over again until they start to open up and bear fruit for you. And like that story, the story of Edward's death has always been a story about me. It's always been a story about my experience, but it's never been complete. And that's what that's what I've been missing. And, it really changes everything. It really changes how I kind of understand anger. And I just, I'm so grateful that all of this has happened. And it happened fast. Like it hasn't been a long drawn out exploration. It's been here's a new layer that I need to explore. And I just followed it in, and all the layers, all the armor just kind of, it just kind of fell off. I mean, yesterday's stream was full of anger and emotion and just, and no one watched it. I didn't get any, there were no likes, there's no feedback, there was no nothing. No one watched it. It's like, I just basically used y'all for my, my talk therapy. But it happened fast, and so the whole day had this quality to it, and it's just been so cool. So I'm so grateful for that, and I'll end there, and we'll do a practice, and get on with the day. going to focus in on the dripping sounds of the rain and the water. So I'm going to focus in on the sense of sound, and I'm going to go exclusively into sound. Just zooming in with one sense and watching the one piece unfold and open. And see, what I notice when I'm kind of focusing in on one thing, I can tell the way thoughts pop in. So I had a couple thoughts pop in around someone I had talked to yesterday. I had some thoughts shoot around about what's going to happen in the future. I had some analysis. I have a song in my head. And so it's like kind of a whirlwind a little bit. Like you've gotta kind of go into the experience of the moment and stay focused on what you're doing. And one of the things is if you stay focused in one space, right, you've got to kind of fend off the interruption. And another aspect which is kind of nice is, so on other days I'll bounce around. So I'll go sound, smell, taste, touch. And so the movement itself kind of engages the mind in a way that, you know, the mind is already doing, which is moving around. And so it's a part of the skill is being able to do all of that, right? So it's staying focused on one thing and then going and moving it around. But, you know, it's just something to be mindful of when you're practicing. Let's go to second bell. So going into my body, feeling my ground. I've added 2 more pillows to my seat just to kind of try a new kind of heightened level of comfort. It's okay. It feels unsecure. So I notice at my ground, because the way you think of ground is what your body's touching, is I notice I'm holding my leg muscles to keep 2 of the pillows from slipping. So there's this element of if I give all the way into the ground, there's going to be a slip. So there's kind of a resistance. I can feel the pull, and I feel the not letting go. So there's that. I can tell that. It's just like a little edge of resistance there. The ankles feel a little bit too heavy. So there's like too much pressure. I can feel too much pressure on my ankles in a way that feels uncomfortable. There goes the slip. So it's unstable, right? So, you know, I'm not going to redo the whole thing. I'm just going to kind of get to where it is stable enough. So I'll move up to the pelvis. Again here, it's kind of a looking for comfort, and I'm pretty comfortable with the pelvis. I've got that squared away, so won't spend too much time there. Then I'll go to the core, and typically I'm pulling my core in, so I'm going to kind of like tilt my pelvis like a bowl, tilt it forward, and let my belly out. Kind of like just letting a Buddha belly out, just let it out. But at the same time, I'm going to lift my heart a little bit. So there's a lift and a let go. So it's like the structure of my spine is going to add the tautness that I like and that feels comfortable, not the condensing or crunching or squeezing of my stomach muscles. So from there, travel up to heart space. Heart space feels good. The chest feels open. Shoulder blades feel back and down. Shoulders feel fine. Chest feels broad. Collarbones feel broad. Balancing that out a little bit on the center of my pelvis so that the whole of the torso is well established. From there, come up to the throat. No hold. Everything in the throat feels open, comfortable. Throw a little swallow down there. Yep, all good. What I mean by all good is that there's no more work that needs to be done. It's integrated smoothly. There's a comfort level here. And so now that I've got the comfort level, it's kind of like, okay, well, what's the next layer of awareness I can go? And so I can notice things like my breath in my throat. So I can notice the way the air moving down my throat and up my throat as I breathe feels. Just getting kind of deeper into the moment. This isn't so much like, getting deep into a deep meditation. This is more of a getting to the body, recognizing how the body's doing. Really having a relationship with the body that's really interactive. Coming to the top of the head, top of the spine. So the body is the landscape. And each time you go through and explore the landscape, there's new landscape to be aware of, and there's new engagement with the landscape that bears results. Or not so much results, but bears fruit. So it's like you start to notice things, and you start to put the tapestry together, and your relationship to the tapestry starts to become more nuanced and learned. It's an engagement as opposed to just you're walking over it without any kind of knowledge of what's going on underneath. Top of the head, top of the spine. Let's go to face. The face feels light. Face feels open. Face feels transparent. So a little smile on there. That doesn't feel very natural. That feels better. All right, let's go to third bell. Just noticing my breath. The feeling of my breath today is just like, it feels powerful. It's like I feel like a rhinoceros, or like a, it's interesting as I'm breathing. I feel like remember the movie Home Alone, where he goes down into the basement and he sees the kind of the radiator, the heater, whatever. It's got this dark, it's brown. It's got this like mouth to it that opens in his imagination. He's like, oh, he just gets scared of it. He runs away. But the next time when he's like ready, he sees it again. He's no longer scared. It feels like the furnace. Yeah, it feels like my body is like this powerful furnace. And then I'm breathing and I'm opening and expanding the furnace and then settling it back down. It's like this massive engine ready to do whatever. Tons of space. Big. It's real big. The breath feels really big. Expansive. I can feel my body expanding and settling, expanding and settling. It's powerful, huge. Spacious, empty. Directions up and down, like the way an umbrella opens. An umbrella opens and expands in all directions, and then collapses and condenses in all directions all at once. That's what it feels like. I just feel very appreciative. I feel very appreciative to God. I feel very appreciative to just the way life can unfold and how fast it unfolded yesterday. Like processing deep felt feelings used to take so long. But I feel the strength of it. I feel the strength of Edward's anger, and I recognize it. Like I used to not want to tell his story largely because, it's the story of being a victim of circumstance and life being hard and mean and brutal, but it's the story of life, and it's the story of, life kind of continuing to fight on, and Edward's fighting on inside of me. And I never really thought about taking that forward, but now here I am telling his story in a format that can move around the world at the speed of light. And now his story is on a platform for all to hear. And the story of this anger, the story of the Garden of Eden, the story of the tree of life and the tree of good and evil, and God and processing and mindfulness and armor and anger, and all these things are all now out. And I feel so grateful, and I feel connected to Edward in a way that I've never felt before. It was always sadness, always my own anger. Why did this have to happen? But now it feels complete. It feels circular, like I've got the whole story now, and I'm so grateful. And I want to share this. I want to share it with whoever needs it. I want an invisible string from my heart going out to your heart. Whoever's watching this, know that there's an invisible string right now shooting out of my heart forever, for all of eternity, for as long as the servers hold this video. There's an invisible string right now shooting out of my heart, connecting to you and sending this gratitude, this goodwill through your screen, from me into you, right into your heart. And for all of eternity, I'm going to be in this moment sharing my goodwill with you and wanting you to feel stronger and wanting you to feel more complete, and seeing how the whole of existence is inside of you, passed on forever. And we are in this together, and I'm sharing this moment with you, and I'm thinking about you and wondering if you'll find a little bit more happiness, a little bit more peace, a little bit more connection. And I honor you and I support you. I hope you suffer less and feel joy and awe more. If you want, you can finish with me by taking 2 deep inhales, and on the second exhale, we'll be done. Whoa. I was planning on not doing this. I was just like, nah, I'm not going to do it today. I didn't get to walk in. It's raining. I'm just going to not do it today. Yeah, I'm glad I did. Well,